Hi, Miriam.
Hi.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
I don't think we're going to get Michael today, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
There might be a couple of other people who were kind of interested in showing up from the just residents, but I don't know if that's going to happen. So it might just be us. Would you be willing to take note, or do you want me to take? I can take notes. You know what? I'll have access to the recording, so I can take the notes.
Okay.
Okay. So we're convening at 1:07 p.m. of the Stormwater Working Subgroup. So how do you want to proceed? I've got some thoughts that I've been exploring, but do you want to just throw out, do you have some ideas you'd like to talk about?
To be totally honest, I volunteered for this working group as a kind of way to learn more about the issue. Yeah. And so I am happy to support what direction you want to go in and offer my opinion, but I don't have a lot of knowledge base to start in any direction.
That's all right. Well, you know, because sometimes it's good not to have a lot of preconceived ideas. What I did, and you might want to do this, is I went through, and I can email, let me make a note to email it to you. I went through the list of the last round of projects that were funded by the MVP program, because that's always a good way to find out what are appropriate kinds of projects, is to find out what kind of projects they already have deemed competitive enough to fund. And sometimes you can even go to those particular towns' websites and they'll have reports for those projects or even information about what the application was involved. I mean, some towns even have the grant applications on their websites. Not many do, but they have the final reports from those projects. So I just went through it myself and found that really helpful.
Where would I find that list? I'll
email it to you.
Okay.
But I can even pull it up if we want. But just as I have it open. Let me find it. Just to give you a snapshot, there are a lot of projects that got funded that were already kind of in the pipeline, shovel ready, meaning the town already had a very clear vision of something it wanted to do around stormwater infrastructure and had already done the design and started the permitting process. And this was kind of paying for all of that. And so the kinds of projects that I see a lot of are restoration, like wetland restorations, for example, in a few communities where a stream was going through a culvert in the town, they removed the culvert and then restored the banks to make it a viable stream again with viable bank habitat, as opposed to just a pipe going underneath pavement and concrete, which was very cool.
So that was a project that was funded.
Yes, there's a number of projects like that. One of the things that they're interested in is green infrastructure and nature-based solutions. So if you have a project that is utilizing those principles, and low impact design is also a principle that they prioritize, those projects are more desirable than ones that don't prioritize those things. There's a number of projects that involved replacement of culverts, where it's a specific bridge or culvert, stream crossing, where they replace that one project, that one culvert. For example, in Shutesbury, we're in the process, we already have it in the pipeline and we have the funding for it through Department of Transportation to replace the culvert down by the Lake Wyola Dam on Locks Pond Road. And that's a big culvert. It's a huge project. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. Took a long time to engineer and the permitting was complicated, but that's an example. Or another example that was recently funded through the town of Leverett was down the S curves down in Leverett on what is Shutesbury Road. Once you cross over into Leverett, they just replaced a culvert last month. Have you seen that?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Do you ever go down? You probably don't go down the S curves because you live down at the bottom of Pratt Corner Road, but there was this large culvert near number 6 Road and Mountain Road, Old Mountain Road. And they replaced that culvert, and that was funded by the MVP program.
Mm.
So if the town had another culvert or a number of culverts that it had decided really need to be replaced, and those were specific examples, then it seems like those might be fundable. Some of the feedback that the town has gotten is that the MVP program likes very clearly defined projects, and it likes projects that could be completed within a 1-year period, as opposed to projects that are multi-phase and are very vaguely defined and would not able to be completed in a reasonable time period. In some of these instances where they're doing culvert repairs, people have already, because the design work had already been done, they'd already submitted the permit applications. So the permitting was already underway at the time when they applied for MVP. And we're not at that stage. I don't know, without talking to the town, if they do have some culverts identified that they would like to replace. I know that there's a lot of culverts. I don't know if you understand how this works with culverts, but The town roads have many, many wetland crossings. I mean, there's dozens and dozens of them. And the crossings go under the pavement, and on the dirt roads, it goes under the dirt surface. And they're really essential for flood management and for resilience from stormwater. And it's a major climate change risk. If the infrastructure is at risk, then the roads could go out and homes could get flooded, could be even dangerous to people. So that's why towns are concerned. And these culverts often are, if they're old, they are either falling apart or they were made with improper materials. I mean, I've seen some that are just made out of stone, and they're not very sturdy. And sometimes they're not large enough. Now, there's new regulations that have been passed in the last 30 years about the size of culverts, that culverts have to be big enough to handle stormwater. And if they're too small, then the road will flood. And then another issue with culverts is beaver activity, because beavers often like to dam around culverts and can flood. And then you get into this whole dynamic about how do you protect the culverts from the beaver activity. But there are flow protection devices that can be constructed that prevent the beavers from being able to flood the culverts, so that the beavers can kind of coexist with the culverts. And that's considered to be a nature-based solution, as opposed to just trapping the beavers.
Right.
So culvert replacements are in there. I mean, there's a whole bunch of coastal projects aren't really relevant to us. There was a project that was funded in Sheffield and New Marlborough that involved a dirt road resilience project. And I think that was one of the ones that were kind of talked about, was kind of an assessment of dirt roads, looking for nature-based solutions for managing stormwater on dirt roads, which are a particular problem because stormwater easily erodes dirt roads.
Yeah. So redirecting that stormwater so that it's not as detrimental for the dirt roads.
Yeah. There's, so sometimes having swales on the sides of roads, so the stormwater sheds to the sides rather than just sitting and washing across the roads. And sometimes having detention basins to collect stormwater so that it doesn't accumulate and erode. So sometimes if you have a dirt road with a steep slope, the water just kind of channels down the dirt road, and this will wash out huge amounts of sediment. And then when it hits the bottom, which is usually where a wetland would be, or a stream crossing, just the way things work with nature is that the wetlands are usually at the bottom of the hill, then all those sediments just flood into the wetland, which damages the wetland, but it also clogs up the culvert, which then means there's a risk to that culvert flooding because it's being plugged up with sediment and not enough water is getting through it. So a solution is to create cuts and stormwater basins along the slope on each side. Right. So you're kind of collecting stormwater in little pots. This is just one example. And then there's less water getting down to the bottom. And so there's less erosion.
Right. Yeah, slowing and sinking the water before
it
gets down.
Slow the water and distribute the water so it's not concentrating in one place. And so because if there was no road, naturally there'd be vegetation that would be catching the water and absorbing the water so it doesn't all go downhill. If you think about rainwater in a forest, yes, some of it will flow down the hill, but a lot of it just gets trapped by the forest vegetation and all the debris and leaf litter and logs and things that are on the ground that prevent flooding.
Right.
Oh, here's Mary Jo Johnson. I'll let her join on. Hello, Mary Jo.
Hello.
Welcome. You're muted. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, sorry I'm late. My dog need to go out.
That's okay. So this is Zoe Weisenbaum, who is also on the ECAC committee. And Mary Jo, you were at one of our ECAC meetings, or a couple of them. So maybe you guys were already acquainted.
Yes. Yeah, I recognize you.
So Mary Jo, what we were tasked with was brainstorming ideas for MVP, Municipal Vulnerability Plan grant application ideas, in order to advise the select board, because the select board has to decide if it wants to submit any grant applications for this funding cycle. And they're going to be meeting on January 10th, which is just next week, to review recommendations from various town committees. And so our committee, our little working group, was going to look just only at stormwater. And I was just explaining to Zoe a little bit about what some other successful MVP grants have been funded. And so have you looked at MVP? Are you familiar at all with it?
Yeah, I looked to see what grants were getting funded.
Yeah.
A lot of stormwater grants are getting funded.
A lot of stormwater grants are. And what I was saying to Zoe is a lot of them are very discrete projects. They're already well defined. It's like, we're going to replace this culvert, or we're going to take this dam out, or we're going to restore this coastal area or something. But I think that there are discrete projects we might be able to come up with, or the town could come up with. And obviously our highway superintendent is the person on the ground who knows the most about individual areas of the roads and culverts that might be the highest risk or highest priority. And, that we're not as I don't think is knowledgeable about it, but there were two kinds of assessments that have been talked about for a grant application. One was to have a rural dirt road resilience assessment done, which would be a survey, an engineering study of the dirt roads in town, looking at climate impacts and nature-based solutions to stormwater management, because Shutesbury has so many dirt roads.
Who would do that assessment?
You'd hire an engineering firm.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a really good example of what something like this would look like. There is an assessment that was done by the towns of Sheffield, New Marlborough, and Sandusfield. They did a combined MVP grant. And that's another thing with MVP grants, you can make them more competitive by combining with other communities. So, one of my thoughts had been, if we really wanted to recommend this kind of a study, maybe we could make it more competitive by reaching out, for example, to Leverett, who also has a lot of dirt roads, and maybe trying to develop a joint project, because I think that would make it more competitive, because it's covering a larger region, have more impact. The grant would have more impact.
I was actually thinking of what you're saying as a potential problem, because I took a look at a map of Shutesbury, and I was looking at like our population concentration around Lake Wyola. It's probably like where the most concentrated population is. Mm. And if you look at stormwater issues, everything related to stormwater that could potentially really be an issue, which uphill from Lake Wyola, is in Wendell. So I was thinking to myself, if you're gonna look at potentially the concern that Mark Rivers is always concerned about. The Fisk Pond, and there's another little pond next to it, just
McAvoy.
Yeah. They just have two relatively small, I mean, just to look at it, to eyeball it, there may be more going on than meets the eye, but they have two relatively small, relatively old, kind of unstable looking dams that are basically between our most populated area and massive amounts of water. So I was kind of thinking, I don't know how that would work, but it's apparently from what you're saying, it would be good to potentially look at that area in cooperation with Wendell if they were interested. Because it's difficult to get Wendell to fix something for us.
Yeah. That's a little different than a dirt road assessment, because now you're talking about a watershed analysis as opposed to stormwater management on dirt roads, because and I'm not saying no to that, I'm just saying those are two different things. The dirt road assessment is looking at green infrastructure development on roads to manage stormwater, and maybe but I think what you're talking about is really looking at that watershed analysis. I thought about the Lake Wyola as an issue, and we certainly could pitch that as a recommendation. However, I'm afraid that it is kind of duplicating an effort, because FERCOG has, Franklin Regional County of Governments. Are you familiar with that, Zoe? That's the county government. And they have a natural resources planning department, and they got a grant to do a watershed analysis of Lake Wyola.
Oh, so they're already doing that.
They actually did it. They did it last year. I have a draft of it. However, they felt that the particular engineer that they hired did too limited a job.
This is that.
What?
Oh, this is that one.
That one, right. And so they ran out of funds for that fiscal year. That grant is being renewed, and they will hire another engineering consultant to go back, look at that draft and improve on it. I think they felt like, and you can sort of see, it's a very vague, I have the report, it's a very vague report. It just says, yeah, you really need to fix this area. And some of his suggestions were not useful. For example, one suggestion he had was that they use town-owned parcels of land around Lake Wyola over on the west side to create stormwater basins. But those parcels were traded to Kohl's recently and are no longer owned by the town. I don't know why they didn't tell the engineer that. Because those parcels are now no longer available. This is up on, that parcel land on Great Pines. You know what I'm talking about? You're shaking. You live near there. That's why I thought you would know. You're muted, Mary Jo.
Sorry, I have a clock that ticks constantly. Sometimes it's bothered, but anyway.
No, you
so
didn't.
There's a parcel. It's a very tiny parcel on Great Pines.
Yeah, that parcel. There were a couple little pieces in addition to that, and all of that got swapped recently as part of a land deal with Kohl's in exchange for a parcel near the highway department. So those parcels are. My understanding is that Evan Jones is developing some sort of stormwater on one of the parcels.
That's true. I've been watching that progress. Yeah. That's
so happening. He is acting on that, which is great because that is an important area. And then another suggestion was that they develop a sump basin near Bob Douglas's property where that drain is. So I don't think that's going anywhere, but they could still do it in the middle of the road. They could, that's an idea. So you have Because it's a low spot. What?
It's true. They could dig a big pit in there.
And put a sump pump and then pump the water somewhere else, distribute it somewhere else upstream or uphill. They could do that. Maybe that's what they're going to end up having to do to get that water to go somewhere else. Anyway, because there's already somebody working on that, I wonder whether that really is counterproductive or maybe a duplication. And if it doesn't come to fruition, maybe that would be for the following year, a recommendation.
Have you heard of River Smart Communities from UMass Amherst? I can post a link.
No,
I think. Can I post a link for you in the chat?
I can. No, chats are just are not.
Okay.
What is it called? River Smart?
River Smart Communities, UMass Amherst.
No, I didn't know about it.
Yeah, they've done a lot of stuff on stormwater. And beavers, actually. And beavers also.
Mm-hmm. So the other idea, I'll look at it. Excuse me, I've got a respiratory infection. One of the things that I had thought of, because it was on the MVP plan, I didn't think of this, but you know, I liked, because it's on the MVP plan and it's on the hazard mitigation plan, is to apply for a road stream crossing culvert assessment. So this, and I emailed everybody an example. I can email it to you if you want, Mary Jo. I don't know, Zoe, if you looked at it, but the town of Uxbridge did this a few years ago through MVP, and they hired Fuss and O'Neill, and they did this really fantastic job. But they went out and surveyed every single culvert in the entire town. They mapped them on a map, and then they measured those culverts and evaluated the condition of them, and then rated them in terms of the flooding risk and infrastructure risks associated, and then sized them to see whether or not they were big enough or not. And then they rank ordered those culverts in terms of their vulnerabilities, so that then the town would have a list to work off of for future projects. And then they had some design recommendations for how to construct these in a more environmentally friendly way, using green infrastructure methods or nature-based solution methods. For example, some towns include an assessment of beaver culvert interactions and recommended actions for each location where there's a beaver risk. So, you know, one of my thoughts in mind of beavers is that this kind of assessment could then also include maybe design recommendations, like design recommendations for how to design flow protection, hardware or, infrastructure to prevent beaver damming from damaging the culverts, so that the beavers could coexist with the culverts. And I thought this would be a real, however it gets funded, I think that the town would really benefit from this. I've looked at 2 or 3 examples, and I can share them if people want them, of towns, the reports, the finished product, so you can kind of see what it looks like when you get this report, but they're really useful.
Yeah, and that's something that could be funded by an MVP grant.
Well, I had an email exchange with a scientist, Julie Bouza, who is a consultant working for Fuss and O'Neill, and she worked with the town when we originally did our planning grant for MVP. And Bob Douglas had gotten me reconnected with her, and she said that it was her understanding that these grants for these kind of assessments or townwide assessments were no longer considered to be as competitive because they're getting so many other grant applications that are specific action steps or, shovel ready projects. And so they've been prioritizing these shovel ready projects, like we're going to replace this particular bridge, or we're going to take out this particular dam, over these planning grants. But, we have to do one before the other. We need the planning grant, the assessment, before we can have the specific action grants. And it seems like you could have action steps built into this, including perhaps maybe prioritizing, beaver assessments, for example, down by the lake. We could write that in as one thing that we're going to do, so that there'd be some actual design and, installation. Like even for that culvert that we've been talking about, Mary and Joe, at Lakeview Road, we could include that particular location, so that, there'd be an engineering study. You're muted again.
Sorry. The interesting thing about River Smart Communities is they have a whole section on using beaver dams to prevent stormwater issues, and using them in and around, or planning for them in and around culverts and roads and stuff. So sort of proactively saying, well, where might beaver end up, and then preparing for that. So I don't know what would be involved in having them maybe do some preliminary look at it. And since they seem to have a pretty heavy interest in beaver related stuff, maybe they could help make a grant application a little bit more beaver specific. I don't know.
I'm looking at River Smart Communities.
Check the videos.
What is Rivers? Rivers sponsored by the UMass floods. Okay. Well, yeah, I will. Let me see who's on it. Evogo. Okay, I will look at it. This looks great. Looks really interesting. Are you there? Okay, I didn't lose you guys. So, so that was one of my ideas of recommending to the town that we at least try to apply for this culvert green infrastructure evaluation for the town-wide, since some of the stuff around Lake Wyola is getting addressed by another grant currently, so we don't want to be duplicating efforts. But it could include town-owned roads. So it could include like the Lakeview Road culvert, for example, or the other culvert. There's another one, I think. And I don't know, if it was combined with another town, again, I was thinking that might make it more competitive than it was just an individual town. Or, again, I think that the Wendell sort of Fisk Pond assessment, it's kind of already being done by FERCog, and that's covering Wendell as well. They're doing, they're not looking just at Shutesbury, they're looking at the whole watershed. And that draft report has some assessment about the dam condition up at Fisk Pond. I can send it to you. Have you seen it?
That'd be great.
Okay. Again, it's not what they want. So that was one thought, was, okay, stormwater crossings. I mean, I think that we want to pitch 2 or 3 ideas. So that was idea number 1. If there were specific culverts that the town knew needed to be replaced, And we were in a position where we could get enough design information together so that we could make a proposal, then I would say that would make a lot of sense to me.
Is the Locks Pond Road culvert shovel ready?
It's already in progress. It's already funded and permitted.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And actually, they're just waiting for the contractor to have room in their schedule. So they're only certain times a year when they can do the work, and they lost that window of opportunity this last year. So yes, that's already taken care of. There's no more need for additional funding now related to that. Though I would say one of the things that I have concerns about, and this is the watershed issue, is that on Locks Pond, there's a lot of stormwater that gets dumped down onto the Sawmill River. There, if you look at Locks Pond Road, there's just like all this stormwater, and there's no sort of detention basins along the way, really, to kind of stop water or collect it or slow it down. And that doesn't seem, well, it's old and antiquated. There's old storm pipes that go along Locks Pond Road that are underground. They're buried storm pipes that then empty out near the Sawmill River. So it's collecting stormwater from way up high in the watershed, and then just pipes it down to the river, which is kind of, what people do. What people did back then is, let's just get rid of the water.
So what would be, am I muted? No. What would be a potential solution for?
Well, just what we were talking about. How do you slow water and how do you distribute water rather than concentrating and accelerating it, right? If you just let it flow downhill down the road, then it's getting concentrated and it's getting accelerating. And as it accelerates, it picks up sediments and contaminants and dumps them into the river. So that if you can create ways for the water to go sideways.
Right. Swales, digging swales.
Swales or detention basins that will hold the water so that it can then just soak into the ground slowly, then the water is not all ending up in the stream. And the sediments and the contaminants from the pavement aren't also getting into the stream, because it's not just sand sediment, it's also the contaminants on the road. There's oil and gasoline that gets deposited on the pavement.
One second, I need to get headphones. I'll be right back.
I'll wait till she comes.
So would this type of work involve asking private landowners to do something on their property?
No, because the town owns the right of way.
Okay. So everything could potentially be done within a 15. What is it, like
usually that's what they do. That's why they own the right of ways, is so they can do things like that. Mm-hmm. And so there are these old antique rusting storm pipes. They're metal and they're all over the place, but they're all over Shutesbury. I find them all over the place, but there's definitely some on Locks Pond. I'm just saying that as an example. Don't want to get too down in the weeds about that. So that would be the one question, was like, does the town have some specific priorities for specific culvert replacements that MVP, we can make a good request to MVP that would be competitive, because we know that properly constructed and designed culverts provide stormwater resilience and protect the roads and protect homes, and also, importantly, from a nature-based solution, provide connectivity for organisms, for aquatic organisms. So you want to have stormwater crossings or wetland crossings that allow aquatic critters like frogs and lizards and salamanders and fairy shrimp and the like to be able to cross the road through that conveyance. And if it's not a well-constructed culvert, it'll become a barrier for aquatic organisms rather than a channel and pathway for them. So, you know, culverts are considered to be part of what we call green infrastructure if they're designed properly. And so the other thought I had, I mean, this was just kind of my thinking, and I've been going down it. One was, okay, the Lake Wyola Dam. It needs to get repaired. We've had an engineering study, so we know what needs to be repaired. That's been on a to-do list for the town for many years, but no one's been able to get the wherewithal to find grant money to repair that dam. What I'm not sure about is because that seems to be ticking off a lot of boxes, right? It provides climate resilience because if the dam is in better repair, it provides more stormwater containment if there's a huge storm and the lake level rises to prevent flooding. But I'm not sure a dam repair is competitive because I think dams in general are not often viewed as being a nature-based solution. A more commonly funded MVP grant project is the removal of dams. That, you know, there's a real push nationwide to remove dams whenever possible and restore wetlands that are currently modified by dams. Because dams are such a barrier, an artificial barrier for habitat and wildlife. So I'm not sure. I reached out to this engineer or the scientist at Fuss O'Neill to ask her whether dam repair was even a possibility. And I guess I'm going to hopefully hear back and hear what she says. Let me see if she emailed me back. If I've heard back from her yet. No, I have. Yeah, she did. Hold on one sec. Let me open this email. All right. Okay, should I read the email I just got from her? Would that be helpful? Yes? Okay. I don't know that broad assessments are necessarily a dead end, but I think you would really have to have some added pizzazz and especially strong public engagement activities, okay, to craft a solid application given the increased competitiveness of the grant. Okay, I believe the dam you're referencing is one of the topics we discussed. So what MVP looks, okay, so the other thing I had discussed with her, where are you guys? I've lost the screen. It was the idea that there's also a dam in Shutesbury on Montague Road that is privately owned and has been deemed an unsafe dam. And the State Office of Dam Safety has ordered that dam be removed. However, the landowner does not have the funds to do it. And one of the complicating factors is that the dam is very, very close to the road, which means that there's a culvert, a downstream brook empties out of the dam and then goes under this culvert on a town-owned road. And that culvert is in bad shape. So I had asked her about it. Let me see what she said. For MVP, for private property, MVP looks for a few things. One, strong owner support, which sounds like it would be easy to obtain. Broad benefit for the community, not just the landowner, which I believe exists here because of the downstream impacts of a potential failure and the ecological benefits, which I would also add just downstream of this dam is the border to Leverett. And I think there is strong interest in Leverett to see this dam be removed because of the ecological benefits and the stormwater protection. Because if the dam were to catastrophically fail, it could take some houses out in Leverett and in Shutesbury. And ultimately, at the time of construction, the restoration area would either need to become public property or be put into a conservation easement. If you feel comfortable with those three issues, I think that could be a very strong project. Well, I'll tell you, I think the landowners absolutely would agree to a conservation restriction, putting the dam and the pond and the wetlands into a conservation restriction. Because they've mentioned it to me. And it's 200 acres of wetlands and beautiful forest land.
So this would be asking for funding for the dam there to be repaired, and potentially the culvert as well, and then also getting the land under conservation. That's like three things that we could potentially get out of this spot.
Here's a crazy thought that we propose to purchase the land from the town, from this applicant, remove the dam, replace the culvert. It's a big project that would be expensive. We're talking about probably $1 million. And then you'd have a safer culvert. You'd have the dam removed, so there'd be benefit to the community. And if the property was then put into conservation area, you could have hiking trails and public access to a property right now where there is no public access. It's posted.
So we would be asking for like a big chunk of money for this project.
Well, I will say there has been talk. I know that the Kestrel Land Trust has had this property on their to-do list for a long time because they have been interested in trying to purchase the property from the landowners in order to put it into conservation area protection.
So they could help pay for it.
It's possible that there could be some sort of cost sharing. They are unwilling to pay for it unless the dam is addressed. So it might be that they might agree to purchase it if they knew that the dam was going to be addressed. And the landowners are both in their 70s, and it sounds like they would like to be unburdened, and their heirs would like to be unburdened from this albatross of a unsafe dam that they can't afford. That's a liability for them. Because if the dam failed and people were hurt or property was destroyed, they could get sued for it's a liability right now for them, a financial liability. And so, it's just, I know they love this property. It's been in their family for many years, and they both live right next to this property. They're both, it's a brother and sister, have homes right next to this property. But I think they've been trying to find a solution for a long time. I mean, it's a very cool idea. It just ticks off so many boxes around, so many boxes.
Sounds like a win-win-win-win.
Yeah. There are a lot of permitting hoops involved in a project like this. Not only does the Conservation Commission have to issue a permit, but because you're removing a dam, the state has multiple permits. And I believe there's a federal permit. There's a and the EPA has to issue a permit. So there's like, just the permit costs probably are $5,000-$10,000. So it's really, and that's not including the engineering and then the actual construction work. And then once you tear the dam out, there has to be restoration work in order to restore the habitat to a natural environment.
So, sorry, you're suggesting like removing the dam and restoring some to a natural environment, or replacing the dam?
No, removing a dam. So what happens with a dam removal is that you want it to function like a stream, which is what it was originally before somebody constructed the dam, right? The dam is impounding water, holding back water, creating a pond. And before the pond existed, there was probably a stream. And somebody dammed up the stream, and then you've got a pond. So what ends up happening is that you drain, you remove the dam, and you have to reinforce the area that you've removed so that it stays put. And then, the water drains, and then you have all this exposed muck, right? That was underwater and doesn't have a lot of vegetation. So usually part of the restoration is planting wetland trees and shrubs in the muck in order to help kind of jumpstart the restoration of the habitat. So I've seen some very cool videos where they tore down a dam, and then it was a big flat field of muck. And then they did it all speeded up so you could see it like in 30 seconds. And then all of a sudden they planted a bazillion, like 1,000 trees or something, little saplings that they just stuck in the ground. And then a year later, the whole thing is this big, large green habitat.
Are all the different like layers of cost involved with this project, is that something that we would have to have fleshed out to some extent in order to propose this?
Well, there's two steps. One is kind of the feasibility and design, and then there's the actual action and implementation. And I think that it would probably have to happen in two phases, that you'd get a planning grant for the feasibility and engineering design, and that would include the whole restoration plan and all the information that you would need to get the permits. And then you would start the process of applying for the permits, which takes probably months and months, and the review of those applications. And then you'd apply for another MVP follow-up grant for the actual construction work. So let's say the dam removal and restoration is going to cost $500,000. Let's say the feasibility study costs $50,000. I'm just throwing, I've heard numbers. Those are just vague numbers, but that's kind of the scale we're talking about. Maybe at this point it's $750,000. I'd have to, things with inflation, everything costs twice as much as it did a year ago. So I don't know how much things cost. So just to summarize kind of where we've been talking about, we've talked about dam repair, if that was possible, but I don't, did I finish my email with her? Let me look what I said. Hold on one second. Let me just ask her. I am assuming that a dam repair would not be competitive. Correct. All right, I'll see what she says about that. So could we try to sum up like, so the ideas are, is a culvert assessment, and what she's saying is that to make it competitive, you need to jazz it up. So what if we were to include community training on beaver interactions and wildlife, sort of green use approaches to, and maybe even wetlands. I think that one of the things they like with these grants is there's a community engagement or education component. So if you're going to have a part where you're going to have listening sessions with the public or public input, or you're going to provide training and education to the public, I think they like those pieces. So for example, if we were going to do a culvert assessment, we'd also maybe have some training or involve maybe the River Smart people do trainings. Possibly, I don't know, as a way to kind of sweeten that up, or we could possibly combine it with another town to make it a more competitive grant.
I know, at least in my neighborhood, there has been this tendency with just your everyday stormwater to design things that just sort of push it down the road. I'm talking with neighbors, we've thought that it might be kind of cool to have somebody come and talk about like rain gardens and storing water on the landscape and how water can benefit your property, as opposed to, the idea that you have to just get it away from you.
I love that idea.
I
think that's been fantastic. Maybe we could even include talking, because this is another issue. It's not specific to the roads and the culverts, but it's a general issue of talking about native plants and also vegetated buffers, because people don't always understand. People like lawns, right? A lot of people like lawns, and they don't understand that lawns don't do anywhere near as good a job of managing stormwater as native plants do, and also shrubs and perennials and trees.
Yeah, I mean, that we're fairly closely packed in here, and people just take down trees with abandon. The house next to me is a prime example. First thing that they did was take every single sapling off their property, and they've got a water problem.
Right,
it's just pure ignorance, really, that needs to get
ignorance
addressed.
And you see it down along the lake. I see this with people who really want to have lawns going right to the shore of Lake Wyola, and then they have problems with the bank eroding. And then they're having to put in expensive retaining walls and repairing the bank. Whereas, and sometimes that's just necessary to have some hard, retaining walls. You just need to have that. But if they had vegetated buffers, there's all sorts of really cool research about vegetated buffers around lakes. And if you have how many feet of a vegetated buffer removes how many contaminants. There's some calculations for this, and it's like 20 feet, is like 75% of the sediments and contaminants get filtered out. And if it's 50 feet, it's almost 100%. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's very dramatic. And even 10 feet has a significant impact on protecting water quality and protecting the structure of the bank.
I mean, if there were a way that everyone just in general around the lake could take some level of responsibility for the little water, that goes by them. And if there were some training and maybe even some way of having financial support for that,
yeah,
that would be kind of cool, because a lot of times what happens is that, you know, one or two people get the water dumped on them, and then they bear the financial burden, and that doesn't seem fair.
Right. Well, we could definitely suggest with an assessment like this that there be community engagement and educational programming on stormwater, green stormwater management and green landscaping solutions, eco-friendly landscaping. And you know, the other issue that comes up a lot with stormwater on the roads and with culverts is what people do with their driveways, and particularly with the interface between their driveway and the road, because a lot of people, again, just want to berm their driveways in order to redirect water, and they do it all over town. It's not just down by the lake. There's a situation on Leverett Road where somebody paved their driveway, and by doing that, they filled in a swale, and it's causing all of the storm water to go across the road to the point where it's destroying the road, the paved road. And the highway department had to go in and repair the road and put in stormwater swales on the other side of the road, but it was all being caused by a driveway directly across the street. And again, we don't have any bylaws or restrictions about what people do with their driveways. I think it's you know, when we as a conservation commission get a permit for somebody paving a driveway, we can put in conditions to try to improve how they're managing stormwater and prevent them from doing something that we think is going to have an adverse effect. But that doesn't happen town-wide. And if the driveway is nowhere near a wetland, then nobody permits it. You don't need a building permit to repair your driveway. So nobody oversees it. Nobody tells landowners what they can or can't do. And that work that they do is in the right of way. So it's actually on town property that they're doing it. It seems to me that would also be an area for an MVP grant to research and make recommendations for policies and bylaws to address that issue on town property, on town-owned roads. Doesn't help the problem down on Lake Wyola on the private roads, but definitely it's an issue across town. It's a universal problem. What do you think of that as a possible area?
Yeah, who would do that research?
You would hire a consultant. That's why
Okay.
you would have a grant, is you would hire an engineering firm to look at situations around town and then research and make recommendations for draft bylaws. So some towns have a stormwater management bylaw. And it depends on the town and the size of the town. For example, you know, if it's a large city, you know, they're a lot more complex because they have commercial property and lots of impervious surfaces. But, you know, I haven't done as deep a dive into looking at small towns and what kind of bylaws small towns pass, but absolutely there are towns that have bylaws that regulate and set limits about what people do with their driveways and have some oversight. Maybe some approval has to be granted either by the planning board. Usually it would be probably the planning board. I think you have to be, usually these stormwater bylaws require the planning board to review and approve changes to the driveways. But given that Shutesbury has so many steep hills, we have so many issues with water flow not staying where the water falls. right? It's moving, and we don't have any regulations for managing that, what people do.
Yeah, I'm also curious about any precedents for like swale building on a slope, like other towns that have done projects like that.
Well, we have swales built on slopes all over town. The highway department maintains them.
Oh, okay.
And there's if you're interested, there's a manual produced by the state called I think it's called I want to say it's the dirt road manual, but I think it's maybe the unpaved road manual or something. And it's basically a manual of best engineering practices for how to maintain dirt roads. And it describes how how roads should be shaped in order to manage stormwater, and then what kind of conveyances and swales you need. So that manual is something that I believe the highway department is very familiar with.
Has the highway department identified any like specific areas? Like, are they somebody to contact about like where there could be more swales?
They have their own ideas about it. I mean, I think generally they have a pretty good idea because they're maintaining the roads, and so they can see where the roads need a lot of repairs. And where they're repairing situations frequently is often where they'll then either widen the swale. The thing about swales is that over time, stormwater deposits sediment in swales, and so the swales silt up. And if you don't keep replenishing, continually excavating them and cleaning them out, they'll disappear in time. Or they'll become deep ravines. So yes, the highway department is probably Tim Hunting knows where all the swales are that he's actively managing or maintaining, because they're constantly repairing the roads. And I don't want to get too much into trying to tell them how to do their job, because I don't think they'll look kindly on any of us amateurs doing that. But I think that, going a little step above the clouds and saying, at a town-wide policy and regulatory level, this isn't about the highway department per se, but it's about, regulating stormwater and what individual actions can be taken with and what has to be reviewed. Would be a good thing, because you just end up with this patchwork quilt of people doing all sorts of things. I mean, even on my road, somebody moved in down the road for me, and she lives right near a culvert and has a dirt road. And very shortly after she bought the house, I noticed her bringing in gravel and putting up a swale at the end of her driveway. And I mentioned I was walking down the road, and I was talking with her about it. And she said, yeah, I got to do this. Otherwise the stormwater is going to come onto my driveway. And I'm like, yeah, because that's where it's supposed to go. So that's you're in the flow path, but nobody wants to accept the stormwater. So I'm just going to start like trying to focus where we're at. So one idea we've had is a culvert assessment with an education and community engagement component, and also looking at nature-based solutions, including beaver management, appropriate ecological beaver management approaches, right? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And then another would be looking at bylaws and regulations as a tool for stormwater for the town, again, you know, that would be probably an easy lift because you can just hire a consultant and they can do that report, and that report could be all packaged up within a year. And then the planning board could draft a bylaw and take it to annual town meeting. And then, you know, get going with that. Then we talked a little bit about the dam removal on Montague Road. And what else? We talked a little bit about watershed analysis. Right? We were talking about that down by the lake. Do we want to give the recommendation about that at this stage, given that there's already an analysis underway, or do we want to postpone that maybe for next year with the hope that the analysis that's already underway will be completed?
I didn't know an analysis was underway of the watershed.
Yeah, that was what I was talking about with FERCog.
Oh, I see. That's specific to Lake Wyola.
It's
right?
it's only Lake Wyola.
Okay.
So but it's not just Shutesbury, it's also looking at the Fisk Brook that feeds into Lake Wyola. So it's also looking at the watershed that is in Leverett in Wendell.
Yeah, it seems like if that's already underway, maybe wait and see how that all turns out.
Yeah. That was my thought. I think it's a really good idea and really necessary, but for us, you know, it's kind of like if there's funds already being devoted to something, we want to get the maximum bang for our buck, so we don't want to spend money on something that's already underway. And then I don't know, the dam repair, you know, the thing I think about the dam repair is that there's a lot of community support. There is no anti-dam repair constituency. There's no opposition to repairing that dam, except for maybe some folks who think that dams should never exist and that Lake Wyola should be drained. And I know there's some people who feel that way, but I just don't think that's likely to have traction. I just think that would be a popular. Let me see if I got an email from Julie after sending her the email about the dam repair. Whoop, I just got kicked out of my email. Hold on. She's been really good about responding quickly. So let me just get back into my email and let you know. No, I didn't get back to her, but I'll see what she says. I have a feeling from what I read, I went to a couple of MVP grant trainings where they talked about dam repair not being considered a green or a nature-based solution. Again, because removing dams is considered to be a nature-based solution, not keeping them in place. But I would say if she thought that it was a viable option, certainly I think there'd be broad support for that as an option. There may be other funding streams for a dam repair. I think there are other pots of state money that specifically are designated for dams. And so it might be that the town, we could recommend to the town, look for funding.
You know what the dam needs?
Yes, the sluiceway needs to be regrouted. Do you know what a sluiceway is?
I'm assuming that's where the water goes over the dam.
It's where the water goes through the dam.
Oh.
So they repaired the sluiceway. It used to be a square stone opening with a gate on it. And they inserted a large plastic pipe into that square opening. And they packed a grouting material around the round pipe to fill in that square opening. But that grouting material wasn't used properly. It was styrofoam. They used styrofoam. And this styrofoam just disintegrated and came out. They did it like 15 years ago. And so now it's leaking around the pipe, and they have to use a better material. And they have to inject it. So my husband said they might actually have to drill down from the top through the concrete and stone in order to pipe in and inject the grouting material into the interior structure of the dam. So it's not inexpensive, but it's not like a fortune. It's not like hundreds of $1,000s, but it might be, I don't know, $50,000, $75,000, something like that. But it is leaking. And so the more it leaks, the more the leaking can further damage the integrity of the dam. You want the water going through the pipe, not going around the pipe. So it is a long-term, it is a problem that needs to be addressed to prevent more expensive repairs being needed. The dam isn't going to like fail catastrophically. It's not in bad shape except for this. So it's not like we're afraid that the whole thing is going to collapse and there'll be a tsunami going downstream, but it's a risk, a long-term risk to the integrity of the dam. So, okay. Any other last thoughts about this? I can write this up and pass this on to Michael.
Yeah, it's the dam repair seems like a really like it's already ready to go. Like there's a very specific action.
Yeah, it is. And the only question is, would it be, can you make a strong enough argument that it improves municipal vulnerability or municipal resilience? Because this grant, you have to make the nexus to resilience, and you can't say, well, we want to repair the dam because this is a recreational lake and we want to preserve the recreational resource, or we want to repair it because there's an aesthetic to maintaining this watershed as a lake, as opposed to just letting it revert back to a swamp and then, wetlands for aesthetic reasons, or for the vista. We can't use those arguments. Those wouldn't really add to the criteria for the municipal vulnerability program.
Right. So how would we argue the reasoning?
The only reasoning would be that repairing the dam improves the dam's ability to hold back stormwater and manage flooding, because you can then let the water go in a controlled way. Like water gets stored in the lake, and then you use the gate in the dam to control how much water goes through the dam. And so if there's a lot of flooding and this water level is too high, the water will just spill over the dam naturally, or they can open the gate up and control and titrate how much water is being released. So they are artificially controlling this in order to keep the water level at a certain point to maintain it as a lake. And if they didn't do that, the water, it would stop being a lake at some point, because that isn't what it was naturally. It wasn't a natural, it's an artificial lake. It's not a naturally occurring lake.
So if they didn't repair the dam, eventually,
if they never did anything to repair the dam, eventually over time, and we're talking about maybe 100 years from now, that dam would fall apart if they didn't do any maintenance on it. And then Lake Whyalla would drain and you'd have a wetland.
potentially in that process, there would be like consequences with stormwater in that process of just kind of letting it go. Like we would either need money to facilitate that process in a safe way with regards to stormwater, or we would need to decide to double down with the dam.
Right, exactly.
So either way, it's like we need money, right?
We do, right. Well, either at some stage in the universe, everybody abandons living at Lake Wyola and you remove the dam and you restore it as a stream, and then it drains and you have a large wetland in that area, which is what was there originally. And then a stream, the Sawmill River, or you repair the dam. Right now, the dam does serve a purpose for stormwater management. It gives us a tool for controlling stormwater and regulating how much goes through. But again, the primary focus of this is not for stormwater. The primary focus is for maintaining the dam for residential and recreational purposes. And that's where I'm not really sure. It's not a drinking water reservoir. If it was a dam for a drinking water reservoir, maybe because that is kind of necessary for the public good, that would have more, tick off more boxes for MVP, but it's not a drinking water reservoir. So it's not like Atkins Reservoir that has a dam. That's it's a water for drinking water supply for Amherst. So I don't know. I that's a question. We could certainly say if it were an option, great. And if it's not an option, town should look for other funding sources. Right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. If
something needs to be done. Yeah,
it doesn't fit the MVP pot strongly enough to be a competitive grant. I don't think we're going to get any community support for removing that dam. I don't think that's a suggestion anybody wants to entertain. I'm not suggesting that. So I think we'd then have to look at some other funding source. And I think there are funds. I think it's just a matter of you need to get a group of people, a working group, to work on the grant application. Which leads me to another recommendation I was going to suggest, which was that and I was trying to look where I wrote my notes, that the town, hang on, I thought I had this all written down. I can't find the document. It's disappeared. That was in this document, that the town for MVP, and I guess this is already a given, but I would say have a core group, working group. I've looked at kind of what other towns have done for MVP grants, and often they'll have a core working group of people who are working on the grant application and the project management, and it's usually stakeholders from some of the key town boards, in addition to key individuals who have expertise in grant writing. And that was something that has come up. I think we talked a little bit at maybe one of the ECAC meetings, was the idea of recommending, because the last time when this grant application was developed, it was only Becky, Rita, and Michael working on the grant application. And my understanding is Michael didn't have a lot of input into it. So I think that making it a more specific recommendation about a core working group would be helpful. Because my sense was with the MVP grant, with the last cycle, Becky managed like 90% of it. I don't even think Michael and Rita even met with the MVP officials for any of the planning meetings. So, and I don't think Michael even saw a final copy of the grant application. So that isn't what my idea of a core working group is. A core working group in my mind is a group that works collaboratively at every step of the process, so that you're kind of leveraging a bunch of skills from different people.
Yeah. And who would we make that suggestion to?
Well, I'm thinking that I would like to suggest when I'll write up what we've talked about today, but that adding that as a recommendation to be given to the select board. And what I was thinking is that, really like ECAC and the Board of Health and the Concom should be on these, this core working group. There should be a representative, as well as whatever stakeholders in town government have expertise. Oh, and the select board, of course. I'm leaving out the select board. The select board, but other grant there, I think that, for example, I was, talking to Bob Douglas a little bit, and Bob owns, for Zoe, you don't know him. Mary Jo and I know him. He owns a property down by the lake, but it's a second home. He actually lives in the eastern part of the state, and he's the director of a conservation department, I think, for the town of North Andover. And he has written MVP grants and knows how to write them and is interested in trying to help the town. And I'm thinking, people like that with that kind of expertise who know how to kind of get the project to home base to completion, we should be looking for people involved who have that kind of skill set.
Yeah.
And I think he's a great resource, is that he wants to be involved, even though, because he lives in town. Well, he doesn't live in town. Well, he kind of lives in town. It's a second home. He has a long history of owning property in town. And but there are other people too that might be good stakeholders. But those are the boards that I'm thinking about: ECAC, Board of Health, Concom, and the Select Board. Just to make sure we're getting a broad perspectives on what should go into the grant and what is a good grant proposal. The other recommendation that I got from Bob was that get a consultant. So what he said is that, a consultant like Fuss and O'Neill, doesn't have to be Fuss and O'Neill, but we already have a working relationship with them. They will work on a grant application. And sometimes they'll even do it without charging, because they're hoping to get the contract as the consultants. They kind of donate their time. It's something that they routinely do. Or you can hire them, for a small amount of money, which it wouldn't be that hard to consult on the grant application. And that way you're really getting an expert who has, deep expertise and understanding about the grant program and can help really produce a very polished, professional looking document with all the proper attachments and, supporting documentation, because a good grant application, needs to have good engineering analysis, and it needs to be packaged well. And sometimes you need statistics and data about the town, and somebody has to collate all of that. And, that's where the working group would be involved, but having a consultant would be a good idea. So that was the other recommendation I was going to suggest we make. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Okay. And, Fuss and O'Neill, we already have contracted with Fuss and O'Neill. We hired them to do the MVP planning grant. So that would be the natural person to go to anyway. And, just the emails I've been having with Julie Booza shows, they're willing to answer questions and give information, because they've already been hired by us. And this is kind of the follow-up to the relationship that they have with us.
Mm-hmm. And they're hoping to get rehired.
Yeah, which is reasonable. That's just the way it works.
Mm-hmm.
Mary Jo, are there any other sources of information we should be looking at if we're looking at beaver management and stormwater? I mean, they're just, particularly if we're trying to develop a plan. Look, you've sent a bunch of links and stuff. It sounds like maybe the River Smart Communities might be a resource.
They're the best lead that I turned up that was local. There's a lot more going on in California, Washington, Oregon, kind of out west, where they have like lots of space and lots of ravines and crazy water and fires and floods and stuff like that. We're a little bit closer packed in. So I did a Massachusetts specific search. And that's the best lead that I came up with. I'll let you know if other things come along. There's a lot of nice informational stuff, but it tends to come from the Western states more than the Eastern states. I found a nice video that summarized a lot of the kinds of things that are important that I put in, other places. I was thinking, that's the other thing I turned up recently. And I was thinking that it might be helpful for people that would rather watch a video than read something, because it just summarized things very well. That was done by people in Washington State.
Okay.
Massachusetts, what do you call them? Just a second.
I'm sorry, it was sniffling.
Oh yeah, okay. The Massachusetts SPCA has a nice page about beaver myths that I thought was really good. I learned some stuff that I didn't know from reading everywhere else about how beaver naturally control their population growth. And so, and how trapping really isn't. A lot of people from Fish and Wildlife will make the argument that trapping is an important control for the beaver population, when in reality, for the amount of trapping that ever gets done in Massachusetts, it's like a drop in a bucket.
Yeah.
It doesn't really influence the beaver population at all.
And you saw that training for January 18th on beaver management and climate resilience. Did you see that? That's coming up?
No, where's that? Who's doing that?
It is being done by MACC. And it's January 18th, noon. Better beaver management to build climate resilience. If you go to the MACC website, I think you can probably find a link, or maybe I had to pay for it. I don't remember. I think it might be free. MACC is the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissions. They do a lot of educational programming that I go to.
Okay, yeah, I see that.
I'm going to try to go. Hopefully nothing will get me disrupted from that. But if I do get to go, I'm signed up for it. I'll certainly let people know what I learn. So.
I have to go.
Yes. Okay. We've been going a long time. Thank you. This has been really helpful. I'll try to write this up and give a summary to send to Michael.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Mary Jo. And I'll try to send you some of those documents that I was referring to.
Thanks. That'd be great.
Okay. Thanks. Bye-bye.